All right, let's jump right into this explainer of Justin Beck's The Resilience Code. Today we're going to decode exactly how some truly extreme survival experiences. We're talking everything from facing down riots in a Brazilian maximum security prison to enduring absolutely grueling family court battles, how those actually translate into actionable everyday life maintenance. If you've ever felt like your brain is just kind of lagging behind life's daily demands, well, you're definitely going to want to pay close attention to the frameworks we're breaking down today.
So, to really get to the core problem this book solves, we have to start by asking ourselves a very modern question. What actually happens when our minds are completely overloaded by unread notifications and just compounding life pressure? I mean, we've all felt it, right? That heavy sense of being utterly burnt out, like you literally cannot process one more request. But what is mechanically happening under the hood when we hit that wall?
This quote brilliantly illustrates the terrifying reality of chronic stress, and Justin Beck learned this firsthand, the hard way. His body physically collapsed from an overdose, literally a complete system crash, after years of running on empty and ignoring basic system requirements, things like sleep, food, and water. As he puts it, the device doesn't send you a final warning, it just shuts off.
Section 1. The System Under Siege.
Let's look at how chronic stress actively breaks down our physical and mental hardware when we just leave it unchecked. See, an immediate threat gives you a massive adrenaline flood. A sustained threat keeps you running on cortisol. But chronic threat, that leads to total system erosion. Actually, Beck notes that the absolute hardest his body was ever pushed wasn't facing down rioters in that Brazilian prison. No, it was sitting folded into a child-sized chair in family court, trying to protect his son. He was enduring a sustained, invisible cortisol flood with literally nowhere to discharge it, all while the people across the table refused to even look at his evidence.
So, the crucial takeaway here is a massive mental reframe. When you feel burnt out or depressed, your system isn't fundamentally broken. It is simply crashing from the sheer accumulation of too many unresolved background processes. Think of it like a full inbox. You aren't permanently damaged. Your processing power is just completely maxed out by things you haven't dealt with yet.
Moving on to Section 2, Mind as Processing System.
Now that we've identified what a system crash actually looks like, we need to completely reframe our approach to resilience. Historically, right, we've been taught to treat our minds like a fortress. But here's the thing, a fortress is static. It relies on thick walls, and eventually, under a long enough siege, it's going to fall. But if we treat the mind like a dynamic processing system, well, everything changes. A processing system doesn't fall, it just gets backed up. And more importantly, it can be actively managed and cleared.
So what exactly is eating up all of our processing power? Beck identifies these as the accumulation of unread notifications. For example, as a neurodivergent kid with autism and ADHD, Beck was constantly building filters to mask his true self just to appear, quote-unquote, normal. And that masking? It consumed massive processing power. Combine that with unresolved grief, like the system crash he experienced at age 11 when his dog Shep died, or simply ignoring your basic physical needs, and you create a massive backlog of notifications. Eventually, that causes your whole system to overload.
All right, Section 3, Fear, Flow, and Focus. To actually process these intense notifications before they crash us, we have to start with our most primal signal, and that's fear. Rather than freezing up, Beck teaches that we've got to use fear as a signal to act. He relies on a quick 3-step checklist to evaluate himself, the people around him, and his environment. It's an instinctual process. In fact, he first did this at just 2 years old. He instinctively hid his deceased baby brother's stuffed dog from a social worker who came to collect their belongings. He felt the fear of loss, and he acted to save the one thing that mattered. Doing something is almost always better than doing nothing. And let's see how this builds, because once you learn to navigate that fear and clear those immediate threats, you can unlock flow. This is that magic state where the inner critic goes totally quiet. Beck leverages this exact state to hyper-focus on theoretical physics for 48 hours straight. He's completely, voluntarily muting his body's background notifications for things like hunger or fatigue. The work just happens.
Which brings us to Section 4, the ultimate factory reset. But what happens when the system is so completely overloaded that flow is literally impossible? The inbox is overflowing and a total crash is inevitable. Beck uses this really striking analogy to explain post-traumatic growth. A forced system crash, a factory reset, is incredibly painful and disorienting. But this extreme experience doesn't just break you. It strips away the old corrupted files and reconfigures you onto a much cleaner architecture.
totally free from that old accumulated load. The pressure literally forces a new shell.
But look, ideally, we don't wait for a forced shutdown, right? To prevent an ultimate crash, you have to perform a regular RAM dump to clear out the queue of rogue thoughts and unresolved emotions. You can do this through hard physical exercise, finally having that difficult conversation you've been avoiding, or honestly, just taking deliberate rest. You have to actively process the backlog, otherwise it's going to consume all your available processing power.
Section 5. Maintaining the resilience code.
So how do we actually maintain this resilient new architecture during, say, an ordinary, mundane Tuesday morning? Beck uses a strict 20% framework to scaffold his life. Every day is divided equally across 5 key areas. And what's absolutely crucial to understand here is that all 5 areas are interdependent. You have to maintain them equally. If you neglect fun and relaxation, well, the meditation stops working. If you neglect exercise, the work suffers. If even one area is ignored, the entire integrated system begins to tilt and fail.
And this brilliantly illustrates the need to compensate for your own specific architecture. For instance, the crisis code fires automatically for Beck during a prison riot. He handles it effortlessly. But give him an ordinary email to answer, the system fails completely because it lacks the urgency to produce dopamine. So you have to intelligently design structures that work with your specific neurology, not against it. Stop relying on your memory if it's flawed, write things down, and enforce hard boundaries to protect your energy.
So I want to leave you with this final thought. True resilience isn't some performed toughness for an audience. It is quiet, consistent, daily system maintenance. We have to stop defending the walls of a static fortress. Instead, sit down, audit your timeline, clear out your queue, and find out what your processing system actually needs to run efficiently. Find yourself and live.